Okay, thank you all. We will start now. So welcome and good evening from my side. I hope everyone can hear me well. In case you don't, please just write it into the chat. My name is Larissa Loic and I have the pleasure to moderate this event today. The topic of today's discussion will be 30 years of peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, 30 years of the Dayton Peace Agreement. But before I get more into today's topic, setting the scene and also introducing our great panelists, I would like to take a minute to thank everyone who's behind the organization of this event. This event is co-organized by a student-led initiative from the students from the College of Europe in Tirana, and precisely by the Accession Lab. And I want to thank namely Neira Jiho, Tara Miller, Yasmina Piria, Louis Titz, and myself was also part of the organizational team. And it's co-organized with the Western Balkan Initiative, which was started by the International Institute for Peace, together with the Austrian Institute for International Affairs and the Renner Institut, of which two of the speakers are part of, and myself. So thank you to the team of the OIIP for the support. And which is also quite important, this will also be recorded for the website. I think someone wanted to say something or forgot to mute. So quite good that this happened, because now I can say this will be recorded. So in case someone does not want to be recorded, maybe mute yourself and turn off your mic. And if you have any questions for the Q&A later, just send it into the chat and I can read it out loud. So as mentioned, we will discuss the Dayton Peace Agreement. We will take a minute to reflect on the 30+1 years of its existence and specifically its implications for today and what we could learn from it for the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and maybe even other conflicts. We will take about 40 to 50 minutes to do it in this panel style discussion, and then we will open the floor for another 30 minutes. It's a quite ambitious program, but I think we have found the people fit for the challenge. So let me introduce our amazing panel for tonight. I will start with Senada Shelošabić, Senior Research Associate in the Institute for Development and International Relations in Zagreb, and also part of the Western Balkan Initiative. From Zagreb, we will move to Berlin, to Adnan Čerimagić, Senior Analyst at the European Stability Initiative, also member of the Western Balkan Initiative, and an alumni of the College of Europe in Bruges, who, funny enough, was there on an Austrian scholarship, just like me right now. And then we go to Vienna, to Vedran Džihić, Senior Researcher at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs, member of the Balkans and Europe Policy Advisory Group, and someone I can call one of my former professors. And now let's get more into setting the scene. So on Sunday, the 1st of March, we celebrated the Day of Independence of Bosnia and Herzegovina, an independence that the people of Bosnia had to fight for in the bloody war in the forthcoming years, reaching its heights with the genocide in Srebrenica. This ended with the Dayton Peace Agreement, negotiated in Dayton, Ohio. This is where the name comes from. But also exactly a week ago, we commemorated the 4th year of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So while we're sitting here, people in Ukraine are fighting for their freedom, and we'll have to reach some kind of ceasefire peace agreement sooner, hopefully, than later. And I think this makes it even more important to talk about pathways to peace, and therefore to analyze the legacy of the DPA. DPA is the abbreviation of Dayton Peace Accords, which maybe some of us will use during this event, and how it shaped the future trajectory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and if there are also some lessons learned. Now I will hand over the floor to Adnan to give us a brief overview of what is the state function that we have right now in Bosnia and Herzegovina that the Dayton Peace Agreement created.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. It feels like coming back home. Talking about how Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Dayton Peace Agreement function today, for me, it's extremely difficult without looking back to the past, and not only 1995 or the war, but actually to 1990. It was a year when Bosnia and Herzegovina, like all the other Yugoslav republics at that time and many Central and Eastern European countries, had its first democratic elections. Those elections resulted, in case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, with a parliament that was filled with political parties with different vision, not just for country as Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also for Yugoslavia, and different ideologies and different backgrounds. One of them in particular, and you can really read it in detail, both how it developed, how it worked, and how it led to what you've mentioned in the ICTY, International Court of Tribunal for Yugoslavia. It's really detailed in many of the verdicts laid out there. They didn't want to live in a democratic Bosnia and Herzegovina as it was at that point, and their intention, together with the support of Belgrade and Serbia, was to carve out mono-ethnic territory in the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina and simply attach that territory to Serbia. That meant not just murder, not just expulsion of people, it meant many other worse things, destruction of mosques, destruction of religious objects, etc. So the bloody war, its intention was simply to destroy the fabric of Bosnia and Herzegovina as it existed in 1990, and it was to create mono-ethnic territories and then attach them to neighboring countries. It was with the international community, especially with the US, and not just brokering the deal, but also changing the power balance on the territory or on the terrain that led to the Dayton Peace Agreement. So the result of these brokering of the Dayton was a very loose state level. That means the idea was, let's patch 3 mostly mono-ethnic territories with a background of really horrible crimes, suffering of the people, 2 million displaced people, 100,000 dead, and many more wounded. And let's have some loose state level of central state and very, very powerful members or federal units or units called entities and cantons beneath. It was really and today when you go in Sarajevo or Banja Luka or in some small canton and ask, why are you doing this exactly like this, and why do institutions function like this? A lot of them will tell you, well, some of it is written down in the constitutions. The country has 13 or 14 constitutions, depending how you look. Some of it is laid out in the laws, how the institutions function, but a lot of it is actually the result of practice that was established right after the war, with a very strong presence of institutions like the OSCE or the Office of the High Representative, UN. A lot of things that happen and are decided, and decision-making actually stems from someone somewhere in one of the international organizations saying, let's do it like this, and everyone to this day sticking to it. So the post-war Dayton and the Bosnia and Herzegovina is really a lot about patching together once mono-ethnic territories, dealing with crimes, dealing with the consequences of that war, and an attempt to develop and create institutions that could then one day hopefully produce policies and produce results that are in the best interest of their citizens. So we had several parallel processes, from post-war rebuilding, which was very strong in the first couple of years, to EU integration process, from a process of Bosnia and Herzegovina acquiring visa-free travel to Bosnia and Herzegovina acquiring free trade agreement with the EU. All these processes have always been used to build institutions, to change how they work, and to provide some rule of law and some basis for it. So today, Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Dayton still functions as a very federal, decentralized state. A lot of procedures, as I said, some of it laid out in the constitution directly, most of it very practical or practice oriented, and in a way they are producing the results that one can see, and that I think many of the students have seen when they visited Bosnia and Herzegovina earlier this day.
Thank you so much. The idea of this was for everyone here who maybe doesn't know so much how the Dayton Peace Agreement functions, to kind of have the same starting point. Because some people are right now joining, I will just give you a quick overview of how this will function. I have prepared 2 questions for each of the panelists. So we will have 2 rounds, which should take around 40 to 50 minutes. But as this is a student-led initiative, this is supposed to be more of a very just chill conversation between friends, let's say it like this. So if ever someone of you wants to step in and add something to a question, please don't hold back. And in case we have reached our 40-50 minute limit, and I've not asked all of the questions, I would already earlier just take the questions from the chat. So you can ask questions in the chat or raise your hand then. So I would now start with you, Vedran. Now, after hearing also what Adi has said, how would you assess the functioning of the DPA? So today in terms of its political governance and also the institutional cooperation we can see in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And because you're also a scholar in democracy, how would you assess the state or the democratic consolidation in the country?
Thanks a lot, Larissa. First of all, it's difficult to assess something that you love so much. I mean, this is my home country. It's in a way your home country too, and Adnan's and Senada's. So we have this kind of emotional attachment to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And as much as we love it, the country and the Dayton Peace Agreement and the results of the last 3 decades, they give us a big headache, not only as scholars, but also as humans. So in a way, when I try to look at the Dayton Peace Agreement and the achievements or moments that were not achieved in the last 3 decades, I always, in a way, oscillate between pessimism, optimism, and realism. So trying actually to find the right position. As I love the country so much, I would love to be optimist all the time and to see a bright future and to say actually that the 3 decades of the Dayton Peace Agreement brought peace, stability, prosperity, and in a way, and this is the first paradoxy, that there are 2 paradoxes, and this is how I want to answer the question. So the first paradox is actually that we should not neglect that something, or probably a lot, has been achieved by the Dayton Peace Agreement. So we do have institutions that are partly dysfunctional, but do deliver to a certain extent. We have, when it comes to democracy, we still do have, due to the kind of a pluralistic setup of the country, Adi mentioned 14 constitutions and entities and cantons, we do have a pluralism. We have free media. We have, and we've just last 2 weeks, we observed kind of a very positive, energetic protest movement, not only in Sarajevo, but in some other cities too. So there is a space to voice concern, to step up. There is a certain functionality. And this is not nothing. I mean, we live now in times of turmoil. The international rules-based order is collapsing in front of our eyes. Looking from the 2026 perspective and looking back to 1995 in the last 3 decades, we have to say that this is to a certain extent the stability that we have. No one is shooting, no one is killing anyone, is a kind of stability. At the same time, despite the ethno-nationalism, ethno-politics rhetoric that we do have, we still have the secessionist rhetoric by Milorad Dodik and parts of the Republic of Srpska. We have these infights around the finality of Bosnia and Herzegovina, where the Croats and the major party of the Croats, HDZ, still tries to argue for a third entity and some kind of an ethno-territorial recomposition of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Despite all those political infights and the conflicts, we have just beneath this political level a common sense, a Bosnian common sense that is shared by many citizens. I mean, that starts with the popular culture, that starts with songs, with jokes that we tell to each other, that starts with the kind of a mentality that is shared by many, despite all those kind of difficulties. So it's a kind of a mixed balance, a kind of a paradoxy. And the second paradox is actually when you look, I mean, this is particularly important because you study in Tirana also European integration, EU enlargement, democratic consolidation. And when it comes to the European integration, the paradoxical point is that of course, I mean, Bosnia is lagging behind. I mean, when it comes to reforms, and 2026, we can't expect a huge breakthrough as Bosnia is heading into elections, into general elections. So Bosnia is lagging behind. Albania, Montenegro are front runners. Serbia is an authoritarian state, lagging behind, but at least now Edi Rama and President Vučić suggested a kind of a new model of how to move towards the European Union recently in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. And Bosnia is here lagging behind, and it lacks capacities for compromise, which is crucial step towards the European Union. You need to be able to make compromises. Sometimes they are hurting you, and sometimes you need to go a step out of the comfort zone. That's not happening. But at the same time, I think Bosnia is more European than many other countries that are inside of the European Union. First of all, it has a huge diaspora. And this huge diaspora is partly or largely European. I mean, Larissa, you are part of this diaspora. Me, the same. Senada, Adnan sitting in Berlin, Senada sitting in Croatia. We all do contribute to the European character of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina look towards Europe. When they migrate and when they are not so amused, they look towards Europe. When they want to get some kind of a positive inspiration for the future, they look towards Europe. And I think this kind of a leaning towards Europe and being truly European by the setup of the country, by diaspora, but also by the geography and by the mentality, can be a kind of a promise for the future to a certain extent. And that brings me to my last point, the recent protests in Sarajevo that erupted after a tram derailed and killed a young person, artist from the University of Sarajevo, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. And I think what happens in Bosnia, despite this kind of apathy and standing still in terms of European integration and reforms, there is a kind of a nucleus, a seed of resistance, of wishing and wanting to get something different than that we have right now. It pops up, it goes down, it's suppressed by political elites, by political structures, but it's utterly a part of today's Bosnia. So taking all these paradoxes together and taking this kind of a mixed picture, if I would be, try to be optimist, a realist, or real utopist to a certain extent, I would say that bits and pieces for a positive future of Bosnia and Herzegovina are in place, yet the negative forces are also in place, and that's going to be a kind of a fight. And I think first step in this fight needs to be probably taking the citizens' duty of voting seriously in the general elections in 2026 and try to change the circumstances in Bosnia and Herzegovina and to open up to all those energies that we have that are quite positive.
Yeah. Thank you for ending on the elections, something we will definitely have to follow closely, and especially for showing these, I think there are also often these beacons of hope, and the demonstrations we see in Sarajevo right now are definitely a beacon of hope and show a lively civil society. And also something which we often hear in our degree here is, or especially the European Union says when it comes to Western Balkans, the EU is not just enlarging, the EU is completing itself by having the Western Balkans as part of it. But now I would turn to Senada and go on a bit, look at something else a bit, because I mean, it was already mentioned by Adi that the DPA was essentially an American broker deal. So with Richard Holbrooke driving the negotiations, but yet the first High Representative was the EU negotiator, a Swede. We have seen maybe, or this is what I would want to know from you, would you assess that there has been a change in power dynamics of international influences since the creation of the DPA until now? And how would you assess this?
Hello to everybody. my co-panelists, and to you, Larissa, and your team for organizing this and inviting us. With a brief historical reflection, we wouldn't have the Dayton Peace Agreement if it were not for the Americans. And the international community in different formats tried to stop the war, and eventually the Clinton administration managed to do it. Obviously, the United States was a different international actor then than it is now, and the world definitely was a different place than it is now. I think looking back, Bosnia and Herzegovina, or the conflicts in the Balkans, including Kosovo, got more international attention than they would have if they happened at a different historical moment. And this is something that we need to understand. The peak of liberal interventionism, or the liberal idea, the end of history, as one book was called, at the end of the Cold War, was a moment when when Yugoslavia erupted basically in violence, and the rest of the world was going towards the peace. If I may add only to what Adi, or to give my perspective, how I look at the Dayton, because we can't unpack everything. But I think the main, and both Adi and Vedran mentioned, yes, the benefit, and it is huge benefit, especially if we think that we are all humans, that we all have our small little lives for limited time on this planet. And there are people that we love, and there are houses in which we live, and communities to which we belong. And when this is destroyed, as we see in so many places in the world, this is basically either the end of life or huge trauma for the rest of the life. And this is something that we must carry and keep in our minds when we discuss even technical things as a peace agreement, because it did stop the killing. However, and this is the major benefit, yes, there was no major disruption in terms of stability since then. But because it is a bad piece of it's simply a problematic document in its essence, we do have problems with it for decades afterwards, because it was badly written in short time, with ideas that were not fully matured, with people who pretended maybe that they wanted peace, or they were tired, or they thought they would get something in later on. So it was signed as a document to develop, to evolve, to be upgraded. But then it got basically sealed in stone. And this is the problem. We have development of more than 3 decades, and we are forced to reduce politics to what was the situation in 95. All societies develop, but Bosnia is basically, the political process is hijacked by a document that has never been even translated locally. It's only the official version is in English. Nobody has a local translation, and not to say more. My biggest criticism of the Dayton Peace Agreement, apart from elements that, for example, Constitution comes only as item 10 in the whole list of sections, and so on, is that it reduced politics to ethnicity. Every society is a complex being. And we all, each one of us, have multiple identities, be they gender, be they our background, be they our, political position, be they our whatever preferences for certain type of this or that. And this is how we create our identities. And we participate as individual citizens, if we want to, in political processes in our communities based on certain rights that are given to us, and then us respecting rights, but then us also having the rights to choose. And Bosnia is schizophrenic completely, because the system respects you only as a member of a group. And all politics is about ethnicity. You know, a normal system, politics is about corruption, politics is about climate, politics is about, housing, about infrastructure, about history in some cases. Here, there is no discussion. It's empty subject, basically. Everything is reduced to ethnic prerogative. It's boring politics. It's simply non-imaginative politics now, that you count blood cells of people and that qualifies him or her to take part in some politics. So I don't even find it interesting to discuss Bosnian politics, because there is nothing to discuss. This has to change. This is simply unsustainable.
Then a good moment to have a discussion.
And if I can just add, so that is my big criticism. And second element, you know, in modern countries, in European countries, if we want to look far away, in democracies, the holder of rights is a citizen. In Bosnia, it's a collective. This is the problem. The collective has the higher value than an individual person. What we are calling for is the change, like in other European countries, that people are holders of rights, and then they can belong to different collectives, ethnic if they want, but then also others.
Yeah. I think it's something we will touch upon, especially in the second round of questions. I don't know if you want to add something now on this part of international influences and external influences into Bosnia and Herzegovina, Senada. Otherwise, I would move on to Adi.
Please move. I spoke too long.
You never speak too long. We all love to listen to you. Don't worry. Now let's get to something that is especially important, I would say, for us as students studying European integration and transformation. I would like to ask you, Adi, how would you see that the current functioning of the DPA shapes Bosnia and Herzegovina's path into the European Union? And maybe also touch upon something that was already mentioned by Vedran, this blocking each other.
Yes, thank you very much. I think my last sentence was about last point was about how the Dayton Bosnia and Herzegovina functions today, and that it's partly based on the different constitutions that have been adopted or imposed or whatever you want to use in 1995 and a couple of years afterwards, as the cantons and entities were developing and reforming themselves. And part of it is based on laws and the institutions as they were established, and part of it is really based on some practice that was put together or established by different international actors, including OSCE, UN, different agencies, but also the Office of the High Representative, which is part of the Dayton Peace Agreement, and which, according to the so-called bond powers, has a far-reaching powers, unlike anywhere else in Europe, where he can basically enact laws, change regional constitutions, dismiss individuals from their positions. So when we talk about the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there I include also EU membership or the EU integration process, there is a friction, or there is a fight between the wish for Bosnia and Herzegovina to take the ownership for itself, to be in charge for itself, to have in a democratic process through democratic institutions, legitimizing one or the other vision of the country, or a compromise of different visions of the country. And I would say both for the international community, and there I would include the EU, there was always a fear that if the total ownership would be given to Bosnian and Herzegovinian citizens, that they would, because of their different visions of the country, which go from very loose federation to a very centralized type of a country, would simply then end up in fighting that would be similar to those that we have seen in the 90s. So a lot of discussion, if you take away all the big words and the big expressions, and there goes also EU integration process, fundamentally go down to whether there is a belief that Bosnian and Herzegovinian citizens, through the institutions that exist at the moment that have been developed since 1995, in a democratic process, come up with compromises, with solutions, with the reforms of their country that the majority can support and that can be peaceful. And I think the answer to that is mixed. Vedran suggested that there are forces in the country that really champion unilateral change of how the current constitutional framework and institutional framework functions. And we have seen them on display in the past couple of years. That has required both the EU and international community to react and to act in the country in different ways, through sanctions, through different means. The EU integration process has always been seen both by the international community, but also by most of us who follow or see, look at Bosnia and Herzegovina as an orderly way to reform, transform the country, where there would be a capacity of majorities in the country to come together and to agree on different reforms that would bring the country closer and then eventually into the EU. And from the EU's perspective, Bosnia and Herzegovina is actually the first federal decentralized country that wants to join the EU after Austria joined in 1995. And in that sense, it's a bit of a special case through which different also interpretation of what is needed for the EU we have seen. But in the essence, I always like to give the example of the rule of law and the judiciary. In Bosnia and Herzegovina today, you have 4 parallel judicial systems that exist in parallel, that do not have any hierarchy between themselves, and that have 4 different interpretation of legislation and different standards. If Bosnia and Herzegovina wants to be part of the EU, and that's stressed out in the opinion from 2019 very clearly, this cannot function, because you can't defend single market, its rules and standards with 4 parallel judicial systems. So the EU integration process, if it was serious and if it was taken seriously both by the EU and the Bosnian and Herzegovinians, would require for elected officials and experts to sit down and together and agree on a fundamental reform of the judicial system in the country that would produce a unified single system. That's not in liking of some people who have different visions for the country. At the same time, Bosnia and Herzegovina does not need to have one educational system according to the EU standards and the EU rules. It can have more. Or it doesn't have to have one agricultural ministry. It can have more, but they all need to implement and perform same and defend same EU standards in the single market. So in that sense, the EU integration process would, if it would be taken seriously and if it would work as it should be, would actually enable different political sides, different visions in Bosnia and Herzegovina to sit together and in one orderly process discuss what would be needed for their country to join the EU, and then agree on the reforms on themselves that they could then adopt through the institution. That has been happening. We have seen it, for example, when the visa-free travel we had, or when we had a free trade agreement, or different smaller initiatives by the EU. But so far, EU has not been able to motivate a bigger or larger reform in the country that's based on this promise of the EU membership, Part of it is because some of the forces who want to keep the status quo are too strong. Part of the reason is that the EU also is not able to achieve that in countries like Serbia or North Macedonia at the moment, and that goes for the EU and the state of the enlargement policy. But in the essence, and with that, I would like to conclude, like any other reform in the country, also reforms related to the EU require quite a lot of political parties, a lot of political actors to come together and agree on what they see as a potential compromise and potential decisions. And for that to happen, they need to be really motivated to do that. And we've seen in the past that they've did it, but we've also seen that when it comes to issues like judiciary, issues like some other, that they have not been able to do.
Yeah. Thank you for illustrating this. And it shows that it's a responsibility on both sides, on the EU side, but also on Bosnia and Herzegovina's side. And I think the new growth plan is always a good example. It did take a while to adopt a reform plan, but they did get it through. So there can be, if there's political will, things can happen. Now for the second, because I see someone is already raising their hand, we will do the second set of questions now and then take questions from the audience. For the second round, I wanted to also, I mean, you already touched upon it. It's some questions that I've prepared for you already kind of popped up, is more getting into the future perspective. And I'm very happy to ask this, Senada, because I really appreciate the kind of, like also, I think something that was mentioned by Vedran, this is not just a topic, the Dayton Peace Agreement, it sounds very boring. And if you, I mean, I recommend reading it if you want. It's 80 pages, not super exciting, but it really decides on people's lives. And I think this is what is very, very important to understand when we talk about these kind of terms, also like democracy. It is about people behind this. So what I would like to know from you, some people argue that the DPA created the state of negative peace. And I think it's something you already kind of in your first intervention came through and didn't really reach this goal of positive peace. So not just silencing the guns, but actually eliminating root causes of conflict, but also the absence of structural violence. So inequality, poverty, this can all be seen as structural violence. And I would kind of like to hear your reflections. Do you see that, do you think you agree with this, that the Dayton Peace Agreement cannot reach a positive peace in general? And what would you think is lacking to get to this point?
Thank you, Larissa. In short answer, I agree with you. I don't think Dayton Agreement can address the vision or the structure. What did you say? The structured peace or the positive peace, in a sense that it addresses the root causes.
Yeah, this idea of
discrimination, yes, exclusion, marginalization of certain
gender
populations,
equality.
inequality, certainly not, and so on. I mean, the Constitution itself discriminates against its own citizens. And I may speak passionately, but I am speaking based on facts. And this is not something that I like to say to underline my thesis that this system is poorly designed, and it would make a really good functional country if you would try to squeeze it into the system, into the shirt or the suit designed in Dayton. It would poorly fit. I mean, the person would soon, or whatever entity we think about would soon start to show elements of dysfunctionality, because dysfunctionality is built into the system. It's not that Bosnian and Herzegovinian inhabitants and citizens are just some crazy people who like to live in crazy system, and therefore they sustain impossibility of having normal politics. If they go to other countries, they function perfectly well. But the system is designed not to function well, unfortunately. And we can go into reasons why this is the case, but we have to ask ourselves what can be done now. And I'm happy that we are discussing the future. So I said the system can't deliver on a functional, modern, small, developing European state because the constitution itself is discriminatory. And then the collectives have veto powers. I mean, think about, you discussed probably in your classes of possible EU reform. Think about Security Council and then the veto powers. Think about any system in which a party to a collective has veto powers and is not willing to compromise. Mm-hmm. You have blockade all the time. And you have no other way to resolve underlying issues. And of course that they will use the maximum power that they are given. So the system creates maximalist positions. The system does not reward moderation. It rewards extreme positions. This is why it is very, very difficult to understand how we break it. Can we emancipate Dayton? Many people are saying this, not because they are very smart, but because they worry that if we dismantle Dayton, we will have a new war. And it is a big problem, really. But I don't think you can emancipate on a bad structure. If you have very poor foundation, very, very shaky foundation, we can dream of building as nice building as we can. It's always going to be a very shaky building. The system, the foundation has to change. How? I can dream. I can also share some ideas who should do it.
We like to
it's
dream.
Very easy to say, like, everybody has the responsibility, or you said the responsibility is on both sides. Yes, and then no. Yes, in a sense, the EU, if they want to enlarge, to consolidate, as you rightly said in the beginning, the territory of the Western Balkan countries, which are surrounded and bordering EU member states, yes. But the task, the homework, is on the countries who want to join. It is not fully equal partnership, at least not while Bosnia is negotiating. The biggest arguments, in my opinion, that Bosnians have is that really this system was not designed by them. But it's going to be very, very tiny argument because nobody cares. And life has passed. And this was 30 plus years ago. So move on. This is what they're going to say. But the problem is that this system is really, it's like if you have a building in which you had you had three, families and then surrounding families, and then the war or the fight started in this part of the town, and then internal fight, and people, kept the building, but they designed it differently. One group got half of the building, and another one was squeezed into another half, and nobody's very happy. The depression, the poverty, the lack of perspective is driving people out. Yeah. And Bosnia has two chances. Either is going to be eventually deserted, which kills me to say this, but this is what we see, emptying of the country, because people can't function in a system that is designed to be dysfunctional, or they're going to be a reconstruction. And then on which basis the reconstruction can happen, I think we still need to ask more deeply than we are asking ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing this out. I mean, one of the issues is definitely mass migration that not just Bosnia, but the wider region is dealing with or fighting against, I would say. And I mean, we have a whole course of democratic consolidation in Southeastern Europe right now. And it's something else to have a constitution, but have a consolidated democracy. And this leads me actually to my next question, which I have for Adi, before then Vedran can conclude. I mean, the Dayton Peace Agreement was never meant to stay in power, but it was meant as something temporary to stop fighting, to stop a war. So now looking back at it, 30 plus years, do you think there should be a reform of the Dayton Peace Agreement or the constitution, which is part of the DPA? Or maybe something that Senada already hinted on, I would say, in her remarks is, should there be a constitution based on a civic Bosnia-Herzegovina? Adi,
where
this is
where you
yes.
finish your
This
introduction.
is where I
Okay.
give you the baton. It would be a bit easier in real life because
Cool.
then I would look at you.
I I have to say two things. First thing is Dayton has been reformed and has changed since 1995. If you look at the Dayton Peace Agreement, it's really amazing compared to the 20-point plan for Ukraine or the plan for Gaza that's going around, because those plans, if you read, there's not even a single word about democracy. There's nothing about human rights. There's nothing about the right of return of people to their pre-war places of life. There's nothing about international tribunals being established to trial those who have committed terrible war crimes. And if it's not even in the document, as it was the case in the Dayton Peace Agreement, then, you know, having seen it at least partly or to great extent being implemented in reality is even less likely. So in that sense, you know, Dayton Peace Agreement already in its initial draft, as it was adopted, it had a reference to democracy. It had reference to the European Court of Human Rights. It had reference to different human rights mechanism. It did foresee people returning to their pre-war places, being returned their property. It did foresee quite a lot of positive things that then, through huge and enormous efforts by the international community, different actors in the international community, from individuals to institutions, have seen to great extent being turned into reality. You know, I started this conversation today by saying the story about how the war came about. What were the visions behind the forces that led the country into the war? I say that not as my interpretation of the history. I say that as a result of a very long, very costly, and very detailed judicial processes that were done in The Hague and that have described, on the basis of thousands and thousands of testimonials and thousands of documents, what has happened. I mean, this is the thing that, you know, Ukrainians today or people in Gaza can only hope for, or elsewhere in other wars, but no one is even considering to offer them that. Second point, I said Dayton has changed. So if you look at even the written constitution today, it foresees two armed forces, it foresees two intelligence agencies, it does not foresee border police, it does not foresee joint judicial institution, police institutions, and that all exists in practice, not just on paper, but in practice as well. And it was changed not only because internationals pushed for it or because there was a pressure from outside, but also because a lot of Bosnian and Herzegovinians participated in that reform. Serbs, Bosniaks, Croats. And today, if we look, for example, in the situation in Republika Srpska, we have really enormous polarization between the two blocks. One block saying we are actually comfortable in the current Dayton Bosnia and Herzegovina. We see Republika Srpska as not being under threat that requires us to go unilaterally and legally against the existing order, and the citizens go out and vote for those political options. We see with the Croats, despite some will say right, some will say incorrect complaints about the presidency and the electoral law, they go out and vote in every elections, and they elect political representatives. So in a way, Bosnia and Herzegovina has dramatically changed since 1995. Dayton has changed. We have different ways of how it changed, sometimes through international intervention, which sometimes was helpful, sometimes very unhelpful. Sometimes it changed with the constitutional amendments. Sometimes it changed through the different process that exists that are foreseen by the constitution. So when we look forward, I see one big challenge, that is that a lot of people feel the frustration and feel the dissatisfaction with what is Bosnia and Herzegovina today, how much it offers to its citizens, how much it offers to its businesses, and that frustration in some parts of the country results with unilateral activities of saying, give up of this system, give up of the Dayton Peace Agreement, let's do it on our own. And I'm not talking here only about the Serbs or the ruling coalition in Banja Luka, which is the most dangerous exhibit of that. I'm also talking about Bosniaks and about the Croats. I mean, we've seen, for example, in foreign policy, quite a lot of activities by Bosniak politicians, by Bosniak diplomats, which are completely against all the rules and all the procedures that we have seen in the past, just taking over their positions and doing the things. I think a big challenge for Bosnia looking ahead, also taking into account global trends and European trends, is that we might see actually more and more people, due to the sense of frustration with where Bosnia and Herzegovina is today, taking unilateral actions. And as Senada pointed out, no one of us can really responsibly say that that kind of approach will not create some kind of insecurity, some kind of instabilities, that it will not result with even worse situation that it is today. And the second option, and I think hope for Bosnia and Herzegovina, is that as these international and European developments proceed, and as you have seen with the election results in Republika Srpska recently, is that actually a lot of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as Vedran hinted in the beginning, say, well, it's not that bad. You know, we actually are not happy, but we would be more unhappy if things would be worse than they are today. So they choose, options in the elections among the Bosniaks for Trojka, for example, which completely brought a different offer to the citizens. We have in Croat also an opposition building up. We've seen in Republika Srpska as well, and that people are simply saying, okay, let's not throw things at each other. Look at the world is collapsing. Let's maybe come together and finally take the responsibility for this country. I suspect if that happens, EU can help, international community can help, we can help as those who describe and talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina. But in the end, it's up to those who are politicians, who are citizens of living in the country, to move things in that direction. But I see that as also as an option for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And with that, then we could result with a reformed Bosnia and Herzegovina that will not reflect any of the maximalistic visions of the country. Senada spoke about the discriminatory nature of the constitutions. Yes, it's true, but it's also true that Bosnia and Herzegovina is part of the Council of Europe, that there is a European Court of Human Rights that is actually stipulated in the Dayton Constitution as being above the constitution itself. And if we would have a rule of law in the country, much of the issues that Senada rightfully points out that the courts have established would be solved by now. Now, the thing is that most of the people argue that, well, this is because the system is so complex and so difficult, you can never expect the country to implement these rulings and these laws. I argue against that. I think that that's not true, and that is possibility, and that possibility exists. But if as long as the country is either on the brink of collapse, or you cannot expect for the forces to move the country forward in a direction that is necessary.
Thank you. I think I'm not the only one where you just sparked about a million thoughts and even more questions. But I think I will just move on to the third question, because I see there's already the last question from Vedran, and then we will open up the floor because I already see there's hands being risen. I mean, now to kind of conclude this Q&A part, and something that I already mentioned when I said what the aim of this whole discussion is, maybe to also look forward and see, we are in a time where peace is very much needed in this world, and how, if you want to say it's successful or not, that, as already mentioned by you, what Dayton has done, Bosnia has been there was peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So Vedran, what do you think are maybe lessons that the DPA offers for us, and also looking at current conflicts or other maybe post-conflict situations? And would you say, are there any lessons that we can learn from it?
Thanks a lot, Larissa. I mean, there is one first lesson actually from this discussion today. I mean, in countries to function, you need charismatic personalities and people that take responsibility, are accountable and able to act. And I mean, my proposal to save Bosnia in the future is, of course, and this is, I keep repeating it, Senada needs to be nominating for the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Adi needs to take the position of the prime minister, or at least the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Larissa needs to be a minister for diaspora questions. Now, I mean, this is a kind of kidding, but I'm also serious. I mean, we need personalities and persons, characters that are able actually to represent and to stand for something, but at the same time to be serious, accountable, and to cherish all the values, virtues of positive politicians and people that take responsibility. But to come back to your question, first of all, the lessons of the Dayton Peace Agreement, and we discussed so much today. Unfortunately or fortunately, there will be no copy pasting of Dayton peace agreements nowadays. I mean, you just need to take the picture from the signing of the Dayton peace agreement in Paris. I mean, and then you see the three guys, Izetbegovic, Tudjman, and Milosevic. Probably luckily, all of them dead. But then you see Bill Clinton, Jacques Chirac, the French president, John Major, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, standing behind them. You see Russian Prime Minister Chernomyrdin standing in the back, and then European Commission's González, Council's president. So that picture only shows us actually what is needed to end the conflict. It's a compromise. And that is also at the same time telling us that Dayton Peace Agreement and the way how we used to forge peace, like in Dayton, this is a historical relic. That's not going to happen. I mean, just imagine that you put today a Russian president standing next to I don't know, council or president of the European Council or British Prime Minister. Anyway, but still. Conceptually, I mean, what you need for just peace, and however times are today dark and difficult and unpredictable, we can't give up on thinking and conceptually actually imagining what is needed for peace. And some lessons Dayton Peace Agreement gives us. I mean, that goes for Ukraine. First of all, because Ukraine is the biggest conflict we have right now, despite everything that is going on in the Middle East around Iran. But we have it in the European neighborhood, as we did have it with the Bosnian war. So and here I come back. I mean, you need the compromise, you need the readiness for the compromise, but you need the infrastructure for the compromise. And infrastructure means that whatever you take, and when we now speak about Ukraine and possible peace solutions, you need to try to create a just or kind of try to move towards a just peace, which is going to be difficult, but at least just for the majority of those that are involved. And in that particular case, in the Ukrainian case, it means actually having a just solution for the majority of the Ukrainians. Secondly, you need an institutional framework that is functional, or at least a kind of institutional setup, a constitution that does not allow for interblocking institutions to emerge in the political practice, but for interlocking institutions. So for institutions that are delivering to citizens by working together. So this is something that you need to take care at the outset of the peace. Then, of course, and this goes towards something that I think in the European context only can be delivered through European integration and through deeper ties between all European countries and also countries in the neighborhood like Ukraine. This is actually the prosperity. I mean, people, common people, all of us, we all do wish to have socioeconomic prosperity. We want to, as Senada mentioned at the beginning, is to live our daily lives, and through the prism, through this kind of perspective of socioeconomic prosperity, people also judge the success or the non-success of peace agreements. And in the Ukrainian case, but that's also one of the solutions for Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think there is a need for the European Union to step up, fundamentally step up, and reimagine, but also live up to the new imagination of bigger Europe, stronger Europe. And that also includes, of course, enlargement. Might be with Iceland, with Norway. I mean, Iceland is probably going to move towards the membership quite fast with the referendum this year. It might be some kind of association with Canada, but there needs to be, I mean, for Ukraine, peace in Ukraine can only be imagined, and also kind of a stability in Bosnia and Herzegovina if those countries join the European Union. This is a long way, but here Europe needs to jump over its shadow fundamentally. And then just two more pieces that I think are important and that go to point towards those kind of soft factors. I mean, the first one is you need to find a setup to deal with trauma. I mean, trauma healing and vulnerabilities and all types of traumatic experiences that still many citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina share and tell the stories day in and day out. And the same goes for Ukraine. I mean, you need to find ways and tools, investments, how to deal with trauma. And of course, you need socioeconomic prosperity, but also much more than this one. And in the end, and I think that's for 2026 and where we stand right now, probably the most important and most powerful tool for any kind of a peace and prosperity in the future. That's the virtue of hope. I mean, but we have discussed so far, I mean, there is a lot of kind of a realistic assessments of the problems of the Dayton Peace Agreement, a lot of disappointments and frustrations, but I still do believe that in Bosnia, and that's a result of the Dayton Peace Agreement to a certain extent, we still do have hope. We still do have hope. And this is not a kind of a very naive, kind of a naive hope. I mean, we don't need this kind of a naive, pinky vision of hope, but we need a hope that is full of practices, of daily practices, of fighting, doing something, stepping up. As long as we have those people doing something, stepping up, fighting, arguing, being creative, going to the streets, even going to the diaspora, but then coming back and contributing, I think we do keep hope alive. And whatever peace settlement comes for Ukraine, and I mean, when I look into Ukrainian civil society and citizens, despite everything that is happening, there is still hope living in those people. And I think this is where we actually needs to start and pick up and organize that hope and put it into a kind of a proper framework, much better than Dayton Peace Agreement. But at least the Dayton Peace Agreement would also do a work, let's say, in Ukraine more concretely.
Thank you so much for ending on this notion of hope. I think this is something that especially all of us working in this field of political science, international relations, be it in academia, be it in institutions, especially students who are here, where a lot of us want to end up in institutions or academia, really need right now, and not forget that there's still hope and that we're actually together fighting for a better future. And something you also mentioned, these bold ideas and bold Europe. But now I don't want to abuse my power as moderator, but open up the floor to questions. I think the best way we do it, I think everyone who has their hand raised can just speak and say their questions. I think the first one was Timur. And maybe introduce yourself quickly with your name and where you're from.
Hello, everyone. I apologize, first of all, from speaking from the phone. I don't know if introduction is warranted at this point, since I believe that at least the majority of the panelists maybe even dread my name a bit at this point. But I was very inspired by what all of you had to say, and especially, I would say Adi inspired me the most. You know, a few days ago, I got a question from someone they asked me, with all of this Iran thing happening, they asked me, you know, what is the opinion of Bosnians? Which side is Bosnia going to choose? And I chuckled slightly because, you know, there is no such thing as Bosnia choosing a side. There is maybe an elected official having their own ethnically influenced, biased opinion, and who's going to act upon that. But the silver lining of this lack of agency that the state has, I think, is also that no one really, you know, holds it against us that we don't support them as strongly as we can. But sitting here at the margins in my office of my political party in Sarajevo, having a board meeting, I was thinking, you know, we all know that Dayton is a problem. We all know that this system is completely dysfunctional. The belief of the population is that the system is killing the youth, which is what they have said multiple times during protests and so on. My question is there a way to circumvent maybe the blockades or the obstacles that Dayton presents through those levels of governments which are not strictly ethnicized? For example, and I might be biased as well, but we have Canton Sarajevo, where we see very positive, I would say, movements in development of a political culture. Just recently, we had a horrible accident where a tram derailed, and unfortunately, a 23-year-old person was tragically killed. And we have seen a huge uproar of dissatisfaction in the people who came out in the protests. And we finally saw something which I don't think has ever been seen in the history of Bosnia and Herzegovina prior to this, is that a sitting prime minister, cantonal prime minister, resigning within a day of this happening, because that's what the people asked for. Yeah. So, you know, in this case, when we talk about cantonal levels, they have a high degree of autonomy. And I think that they maybe offer some potential for, proactive movements when it comes to things that you would usually expect a state to do. So my question is there any potential in local government to bridge the gaps, at least to a certain extent, which are created by Dayton Peace Agreement? Thank you very much.
Thank you for also sharing your view. I think it's quite interesting to hear for someone who's also active in politics. I would now take a second one. I would just do two questions at once. So the next one on my list is Mina. Is that right?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm Mina. I'm from the first generation of College of Europe. I'm from Montenegro. Thank you all the panelists. Very interesting insights. I have two questions. First is for Adi, who mentioned a bit about the role of the EU as well of domestic actors when it comes to the enlargement. And I would like to ask you about your opinion of the EU's communication regarding what are those 14 key priorities or 8 steps forward, and then also changing bet expectations now and then. And then, let's say from Brussels, we had a quite positive signal. Let's start negotiation. Let's do something. And then I wouldn't say that we did not have at the time anything from Sarajevo. We did, but then very short after, I would say we kind of again saw, in my personal opinion, this political blockage and unwillingness to actually do something concretely. I was at the time present in Brussels when this happened. I was as the European Parliament covering our countries. Had pleasure to work with both of your ambassadors, and this I think is also important to explain the kind of also political nominations among ambassadors abroad, and even in a capital such as Brussels, when you have bilateral, multilateral, but they're doing a very different job and different influences. So what's your opinion about it? And second, I would address to any of you who would like to answer. Since all of you are highly educated, very active abroad and in the country, I really always wonder what's the situation among Bosniak academics? What is there any kind of mechanism or any way of you, all of you meeting, discussing the way forward in the sense about the Dayton or what like is going to happen later, or what are those would have different theoretical thoughts, people who are experts in law or politics, because I see many of you very active teaching, this, publishing, but then politics is simply not implementing what's suggested. So do we have some changes in some trends or not? Could you kind of tell us more?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first question, one question was directly addressed to Adi, maybe on the academic question. I mean, none of you are present in Bosnia, but maybe you have something to say. I would say just pick it up whoever wants, but let's start with the question towards Adi, and then whoever feels like the circumventing DPA through other levels can just take it up.
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that my question was not strictly for Adi, but he inspired
No.
me
I
for
said,
it. So
because Mina
whoever
had one
thinks
question strictly for Adi,
okay,
which was the opinion of the youth communication. If you want to start with this, and then the second other ones, whoever feels like can just pick it up. And I'll repeat the questions before.
Yes, so academic question, not for me, because I don't even have a PhD, let alone to be an active academic in the community. I think two things Mina and Timur touched upon, and which I raised as my big fear for going forward for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it's partly reflected in the foreign policy. So I worked in the foreign ministry in 2013 and 2014. This was just several years after Bosnia and Herzegovina was non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2009, 2010 and 2011. Back then, Bosnia and Herzegovina had a system of how to make decisions on the foreign policy positions. And in a couple of instances, such as Libya, it was actually the vote of Bosnia and Herzegovina that decided on what the UN Security Council position was and would be. And as someone who has worked in the Foreign Office, I can say that there was always different opinions and different visions and different positions. But for very long, and also during the time I was there, those who were ambassadors of Bosnia and Herzegovina and diplomats of Bosnia and Herzegovina were always, or were mostly, able to represent what is a joint position, explain where the position doesn't exist and where Bosnia and Herzegovina is in a sense neutral, and what the particular positions of different either communities or different political parties or different parts of the country are. Increasingly, as someone also sitting here in Berlin, but also traveling throughout the EU, I was in the US last year, I can see that this is not the case anymore. We have really ambassadors and minister and members of the presidency really pushing their own policies. They don't take into regard trying to represent or trying to explain what the position. So Timur, if it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, position of Bosnia and Herzegovina would either be aligned with the position of the EU, because this is what we still do. We align with every position that the EU has. So anyone representing Bosnia and Herzegovina would have to share the position of the EU. If the EU doesn't have a position, and if the Bosnia and Herzegovina doesn't have a position, he or she would have to say that that Bosnia and Herzegovina remains neutral on the issue and defend it. And I think foreign policy is the least of the problems of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I think increasingly we see it in many respects and in many aspects. When it comes to the EU and the communication, the basic problem with 14 key priorities, then 8 steps, was that 14 key priorities came about in 2019. It was the time when the French were holding a veto on North Macedonia, and when even changing the name and having an agreement that North Macedonia had with the Greece was not enough to move forward in the enlargement process because member states were so skeptical and so against progress that the Commission came about with a bad solution, and that was the 14 key priorities, which actually included several constitutional changes, several dramatic reforms in a way of saying, well, if North Macedonia had to change the name, you also need to dramatically change, and let's see you in 4 to 5 years. But what happened was Ukraine and the fact that the EU had a more positive approach to Ukraine and to Moldova, asking them to do less for the steps that were previously for Bosnia and Herzegovina more. So it had to change its position or adapt to what the new circumstances in the EU were. That has not been communicated well because it has been communicated as a result of big progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that has not played well with the citizens or the public in Bosnia and Herzegovina because they have stopped taking seriously EU and what comes from the EU, and in that sense that also needs to change. But I would say a lot when it comes to the EU path of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that we can discuss later if you want, or if you want separately, bilaterally. One needs to distinguish what is Bosnia specific, that there is a problem of not happening or reforms not taking place, and what is it part of the wider regional or wider EU enlargement process. You know, talking today with people who follow situation in Serbia or following situation in North Macedonia, they're not happy about the reforms. They're not happy about the growth plan reforms. They're not happy about where the country is. So, you know, blaming everything in Bosnia and Herzegovina on the Bosnia-specific circumstances and Bosnia-specific situation is neither fair nor empirically true. So in that sense, one needs to be very careful where to draw a line between what's Bosnia-specific and what is a part of the wider malaise or the problem of the process.
Adi, thank you for proposing our next event already. Now to the question on how would you say academics are discussing the DPA? Are they discussing it, the future of a future, if I remember correctly, what Mina asked? And if someone of you now, Vedran or Senada, whoever wants to take the floor, also wants to touch upon maybe on the question from Timo, circumventing the DPA through different levels.
Yeah,
for different
I can
levels
say a word on the academia. Just recently, when we celebrated 30 years of Dayton Peace Agreement, I was invited to Sarajevo to the biggest academic conference, or to two conferences actually. One was organized by the Academy of Sciences of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The average age in the room was 74.5. So that was the old generation telling us the same stories about war and ethno-nationalism and mobilization. Of course, that's necessary to be told, but I missed the younger generation. And then the second event was at the University of Sarajevo, which was a bit different, including also civil society perspectives, etc., etc. And looking only into those two events, and I'm also having close cooperations to universities in Banja Luka, Sarajevo, Mostar, teaching from time to time. I think there is a structural problem. I mean, the structural problem is that in the last 3 decades, we precisely, or like in the 2000s, let's say, we saw a mushrooming of universities and higher education institutions with dubious quality, which to a certain extent ruined the standards and the image of the academic community. So if you ask average people today, and if you will go back to the 70s and ask them what they think about professors in universities, you will get like two totally different pictures. So it has eroded a lot. So that's one problem, which was a bit regulated in the meantime. The second problem is actually that in parallel with this kind of a post-conflict mushrooming of universities, etc., we had the international trend of neoliberalization and academic competition that has increased dramatically. So you need to specialize, you need to publish peer review, you need to go to big money, and actually the essence of what university is, producing knowledge, asking critical questions, being an integral part of society, got diminished to a certain extent. And of course, then together with the migration and many brightest people of Bosnia and Herzegovina left the country. So now you go to Stanford and Yale, and you go to Berlin and Humboldt, and you go to Paris and wherever you go, Madrid, you will certainly and for sure find Bosnians or Bosnian and Herzegovinians teaching with PhDs in professorships, etc., etc. So there's a huge potential, but there is a lack of the production of critical knowledge in Bosnia and Herzegovina itself. So I think this is one of the crucial problems. And each society, I mean, what needs to be in place to have a functioning, vivid society? You need so many pieces. We discussed so many pieces and bits and pieces today, like institutions and justice and prosperity and perspective and future. But you also need to have a kind of a self-awareness, a self-understanding of what you are. You need to have a knowledge about yourself, about your country, about where you belong to, where you come from, and that needs to be based on facts. That needs to be based on critical assessment of your history. And unfortunately, the Dayton Peace Agreement, this is one of the negative points, has produced a kind of a particularization of knowledge about Bosnia. So we don't have a unified knowledge about what Bosnian identity is, what Bosnian statehood is, what the war in the 90s brought, etc., etc. And I think here there is a huge way to go. But to end on the positive side, I also see in the academia islands of very engaged people, partly in diaspora. I mean, I'm just thinking about the book published by Janeta Karabegovic and a few others on this kind of a Bosnian studies, which was full of inspiring examples how to move Bosnia forward. Then I think of, let's say, an initiative supported by the Faculty of Political Sciences in Sarajevo to organize citizens' assemblies in Bosnia and Herzegovina, supported by the European Commission, to initiate those processes, speaking about circumventing usual ways. I mean, doing the politics bottom up, from the citizens upwards, through municipalities, focusing on daily issues, daily problems that citizens do have, be it air pollution or whatever. So I think there is a potential here, but of course, for the academia to prosper, you need a whole society to prosper, and that reconnects the whole argument actually back to the question of the future of Bosnia in the context of the European Union.
Thank you. You even mentioned the two things that also came to my mind. I, of course, had to think of Janeta immediately. And Damir Kapcic, who actually published on the Citizens' Assembly, will come to our university in April and talk about it. So that's amazing. Senada, do you want to add something on it? Or otherwise, I would take the last two questions.
Please take the questions, because I see people are waiting.
I know. But then you please answer first, because I also want to hear something from you. The first, I will hand over the floor to Louis.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the discussion. So I'm Louis, student from the College of Europe in Tirana. I'm French. My question is more about the institutional framework of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 2004 has been created the High Judicial and Prosecutorial Council. It's an independent body supposed to manage the judiciary at the state level, and supposed to bring transparency and accountability by appointing and monitoring the judiciary. And now the Venice Commission and the EU are asking for reform of this body. And I didn't manage to find really tangible answers on how, like, why the Venice Commission and the EU are asking for these reforms. I only found like that there was no progression and amelioration since 2004 in accountability and transparency. So I feel very lucky to be able to ask you the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was now muted. Thank you for the question. We also, Louis is on his way to becoming an expert in Bosnia, in case you haven't realized yet. So we also have a question in the chat. I will just read it out loud, and then whoever feels to answer, but I would, of course, like to hear Senada now. It's from Lana Meyer. Good evening. I would like to know if the elections in October can bring about change. Can you tell us more about the political landscape in the sense whether there are players on the horizon that could be voted for and actually change something? I would say these are the last two questions for the evening, and then we'll conclude and try to have dinner soon. Senada, do you want to take over or someone else? You're muted. You have the same issue as I had before.
Sorry. Certainly Louis' question, I think Adnan should take. And then Lana's question, Vedran or myself. I would like to have 1 minute just to reflect briefly on
Please do.
steps forward. So should I now or later on?
I think this will be also the last interventions you will have, just because
I just want to say, as much as I would like to participate, and this is maybe a special, stage in life or special perspective that I'm taking on the topic that I'm really keen on. I find it personally, and I apologize to the audience, that I'm not inspired to discuss the content of the Bosnian politics because I'm trying to look at the bigger picture or the trends or the structure, the framework. And unless we can change the framework, we will have, one round of elections or one type of discussion and then another, and we can busy ourselves with what the Commission is saying or what is happening on the ground. But as both of my colleagues showed, and I can also unfortunately testify the same, is that we see the downward spiral, we see the degradation. If we saw some progress, and in the first 10 years, we did really have progress. Adi is right, we did upgrade the data, but then it stopped. And then it was stalemate for a while, and now it's going down. My question, I would like to occupy myself, and therefore thank you, Mina, and I will answer her question now. How do we change the framework rather than the content? Because as long as we are inside, we can say one thing or another, but we are in the same game. We need to change the rules of the game. That's the first question. And then second, Mina, thank you. There are people who are discussing this. And yes, we are also divided on ideological positions in which we take with respect to the country. So what Vedran said about Sarajevo, this is one ideological block, and I will be happy. I mean, you will have opportunity to hear Damir speak, which is a great opportunity for you. But there are also our colleagues who see completely differently. They completely disagree with me. They think ethnic element is the basis and should be retained in a society as Bosnia is. I disagree. And yes, we need to have more discussions like this. My third comment is that, and maybe I'm taking too much time, is that, but please understand that the conditions for change are not ideal, but they are there. Bosnia is still kept more by external force than by internal cohesion. We still live in the world where borders are not changed easily, and I hope they won't. But let's see. As long as it is the case, we still have hope. And I would like to add on strategic patience and then figure out how this can be, how a system can be organized in a different way, and try to fight for it. It's easy to say. We all can say what should be nice to do, but people, we need to implement it. I can have dreams of going to the gym, and I know it's good for me, and everybody tells me, but I don't. I completely destroyed my own plan. So we need to be, committed, and this is, I think, the biggest issue, finding the people, having a vision, and willing to work towards that vision. Thank you all. You are a great group. I mean, 35 people have stayed until the end. Wonderful people.
It makes it easy to listen to you. It's easy to stay until the end. Thank you for ending on strategic patience. I will keep this one, strategic patience, for my master thesis. So who wants to take over the next question or stick to the same? I mean, Adi, do you want to answer Louis' question right away? And then Also, the question from the chat from Lana.
I had a bit of a problem with the hearing, the first question, but if I understood it correctly, it's about High Judicial and Procedural Council and what to expect. I think it's a very interesting exercise. It's a part of the conditionality that the European Union has set before Bosnian and Herzegovinian authorities, and in a way, it's a reform before a reform. So for years now, there hasn't been dramatic changes of how a key body that appoints, disciplines, and promotes judges and prosecutors in Bosnia and Herzegovina works. But over those years, a lot of expertise and experience have produced a lot of short-term reforms that would be needed in order to improve the system as such. So the EU has asked Bosnian and Herzegovina authorities to de facto do these, let's say, shorter term or medium term reforms that would not prepare the country for EU membership or prepare such body for what's expected from an EU member, but would significantly change or, and some claim, improve the situation. There was an interest to do it. A lot of different sides have taken part in the process run by the EU delegation on the ground and supported by the Venice Commission and different experts. And I think from the perspective of writing a master thesis or maybe a PhD, it's also quite an interesting one. But it has not yet resulted with neither a joint proposal of a majority in the parliament, nor something that is supported in the Council of Ministers, that is the state level government. And there are several reasons. There are those stated, which are political and which are, we are not treated by the EU in a way that we would like, some claim. But there are also interest-based ones. Even a small change of how this institution works would require different political actors to recalibrate their level of influence on judiciary, but also their level of how they see these institutions are functioning now. And simply, thus far, nothing has changed and nothing has improved in that sense. And to be honest, until elections, I do not expect anything to change. When we talk about the change, and I will be very quick, every elections is about change. Every elections we discuss whether there's a new force that could come. And somehow in every elections we have a new state level prime minister. We very often have new members of the presidency. We even have, opposition in Republika Srpska winning the state level elections, or the opposition in the federation among the Bosniaks taking over the positions. And the change happens with each elections. However, these changes very often happen at different times among the different political groups or political parts, and they happen in different international environments. So just as an example, after 2022, we had a push towards the EU. We had the opening on the EU side because of Ukraine and Moldova, and we had until March 2024 actually a lot of concrete things being done by the state level government, by the state level parliament. But then just a couple of days or a couple of weeks after the decision by EU27 to open accession talks with Bosnia and Herzegovina happened, we had a very massive intervention by the Office of the High Representative and the High Representative Christian Schmidt in the electoral change in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then we had a division among those political actors in those who were ideologically supporting. No matter what the High Representative does, we have to support him because he only means good and he's great for us. And those who say, no, he's terrible. Whatever he does is awful and does not provide for change. And we had basically a collapse of the state level government. And since de facto March 2024, nothing has happened. My interpretation is that it was a bad judgment by the High Representative and the parts of the international community at that time, run by the US ambassador at that time, that has basically collapsed all the efforts of the EU that led to that moment.
Thank you for your last conclusions. And I think it calls for in case you haven't been in touch yet, Adi and Louis to talk about this a bit more, the first one. And now I will just pass to Vedran to also have like concluding remarks, and then we should be on time with just 15 minutes overtime, academic 15 minutes. I think that's perfect.
No, that's perfectly fine. That's important. Otherwise, if we just are on time all the time, we don't leave space for spontaneity and for creativity. Anyway, I think the question of elections, I mean, Adi answered, but I can pick up on that one and then just make a kind of a bigger argument, which is partly philosophical. I mean, of course, I mean, we discussed in length today the deficiency of the Dayton Peace Agreement, the dysfunctionality. I agree that replacing the citizen with the collective imagination of a nation, of an ethnic pure nation, is a problem. I mean, of course, corruption, blocking institutions, but then also like clientelist and corrupt and really dishonest politicians like Milorad Dodik, actually, who are doing ruining actually Republika Srpska while pretending that they are the savior of the Serbian nation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I mean, this all stands. At the same time, and that goes for the global level, but generally, but also particularly for Bosnia and Herzegovina, we can't give up on producing counter narratives, looking for solutions, trying to be creative, and opening up spaces for something new. I mean, Slavoj Žižek calls it real utopia. I mean, utopia is something that you can't reach, and real utopia, it's actually, I mean, this combination of those two terms actually doesn't go together. I mean, utopia can't be real, but if you don't strive to think about the possibilities or changes today, and if we don't contribute to those small changes by our daily work, academic work, you organizing a discussion, organizing a Bosnian diaspora in Vienna, Senada fighting in Zagreb against Croatian prejudices and then political biases towards Bosnia, Adi going to media all the time and trying to explain what the European integration is and what we need to do. I think, and all of your students and young people that just joined the discussion, I think this is the moment of doing something today, which is the only possibility of reaching the utopia in a future, different Bosnia and Herzegovina. If we give up, then we give up forever, and then we end up in a not utopia but a retrotopia. So we go back to the 19th century, and this is what some of the politicians imagine. And this kind of a real utopian thinking and acting or doing today includes Generation Z taking it to the streets, includes the possibility that the regime in Serbia will collapse sometimes and open up a space for hopefully different neighborhoods, includes an option that the EU manages to revitalize the EU integration and EU enlargement perspective and stands up to the moment and lives up to the promises and values of the European Union, and includes the actions of the diaspora, of academia, of people coming back, joining, investing, exchanging. I think despite all the objective failures actually of Dayton Peace Agreement and difficult situation today, if we keep doing what we have done also today, I think we keep up and live up to a vision of Bosnia where citizens can have a livable life, and where institutions can deliver, and where we can be a part of a bigger European family. So I don't want to give up on that dream.
Thank you so much, and thank you for ending on a very hopeful note. I mean, I cannot thank you enough to the three of you for this very lively discussion. I mean, we had everything. We had very passionate answers. We have seen what has the DPA done, what does it mean from the functioning to what does it actually mean to a human being that lives in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was a pleasure to moderate. And something that I also want to say is, I mean, it's something that to mention, you are not just active in academia the three of you are actually active also, I would say, as more activists involving especially people, youth from the region, from the diaspora, but even beyond. And I think this is very important that we all come together. I think it's something that we're doing in Tirana quite well. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, we are here 40 people with 24 nationalities from the EU and outside of the EU, from the Western Balkan region. So a huge thank you from my side to Senada, Adnan, and Vedran. Again, it was important to discuss this important topic. Again, I want to thank everyone behind organizing this. So the Accession Lab, my 4 colleagues from the Tirana campus that organized it with us, the OIIP. It was also asked in the chat where you will find the recording. You will find the recording on the website of the International Institute for Peace, which is in the chat. Please follow the Accession Lab on Instagram if you don't already do. We will organize more events. Adi even had an idea during this discussion for the next one. And I'm sure Vedran and Senada would also like to participate again. And I think which was also nice, I mean, Timur also mentioned now, we even had someone who is active in Bosnian politics. So a nice variety of panelists and participants. I hope I didn't forget anything. Otherwise, I wish you a wonderful evening and a huge thank you from my side.
Thank you, Larissa, for great moderation.
Always.
Thank you from my side as well. All the best. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the best with
Bye.
this.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Go to the gym now. All of us.
All of you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.